Welcome to Get the Elephant Out of the Room. I'm Chris Webber. We all have to deal with difficult people at work, difficult managers, difficult colleagues, and difficult customers. In this podcast, we share stories and experiences of people like you who face these challenges and share their secrets to success. Our mission is to help everyone overcome obstacles and to become more confident, better communicators. So sit back and relax while we unravel the mysteries of another difficult person. Michael, welcome to the podcast, and I appreciate this is an early morning for you, or perhaps it's a normal early morning for you, but thank you for joining us.
Well, Chris, I'm pleased to be here. Thanks so much for reaching out. I'm excited to talk to your podcast team here.
Excellent. Michael, before we start, let's do an introduction. Talk to people about who you are, what you do.
Certainly. I am a 35 plus year commercial leadership veteran. I've been in commercial activity for over 40 years. I started in the fitness industry back in the 80s as a sales team leader, ultimately becoming a general manager. Afterwards, I moved into the career education space where I was a director of sales and then senior director of business colleges. Shortly after that, I moved into the chemical industry in Little Rock, Arkansas, as a sales representative for a company called Van Waters and Rogers. Van Waters and Rogers over time grew rapidly. I was able to move into various commercial roles, becoming a sales manager in 1998. Shortly afterward, my general manager was promoted and I became general manager, and did that for about 14 years, having 14% revenue growth each year on average, as well as a 17% profitability increase. After my career at Univar, where I left as a vice president of customer delivery excellence, I moved into a few smaller distribution companies, more regionally based, as vice president of sales. And today I'm a chief commercial leader for DAX, which is a trading and distribution group based in Houston, Texas. And we've got about 65 folks around the world focusing on supply chain solutions for our customers.
Wonderful. And one of the things I really love about your journey through sales, and it really speaks to me, is I work a lot in what I consider technical fields. So industries like chemicals, pharmaceuticals, engineering, and lots of people come from that background. They come as scientists or engineers or technologists. And yet your journey seems much more pragmatic. It seems much more like here's a guy who understands people, understands communication, understands connection, and that's where you secured your success as a salesman in this highly technical area.
That's absolutely correct. Now, I have a biology degree, but as I tell people, I've forgotten more about biology than I ever learned. So I've relied on the skills I developed in the fitness industry 40 years ago. I was a bodybuilder at that time and a large guy. And often, as I was attempting to sell memberships, people would look at me and think, well, I don't want to be like you. I'm not here to build a big physique. I just want to get in shape and lose my belly. So I learned I had to approach people differently. And those lessons I learned have really carried me throughout my career. And I think I've found people find most engaging about me, or most interesting, is just my ability to engage people and hold a conversation regardless of what it is. I find a common bond and I'm able to build upon that. And I used that in my early chemical distribution sales, and that has helped propel me through the leadership opportunities I've been given over time.
Yeah, I really love that. I've always believed that sales is about people. It's about connection and communication. And one of the things I do this with audiences at times, and I'll say, "Tell me who enjoys buying things, who enjoys shopping." And the majority of the audience put their hand up. They like to buy things. And then I ask the question, "Okay, well, who likes being sold to?" And some people put their hands up, but most people don't. They don't like being sold to. And I find that interesting, right? It's the same, it's a flip side of the same coin. And and I think it's because when we're being sold to, we feel like we're being targeted. We feel like we're being manipulated. We feel like there's something, there's a hidden agenda that we're missing. And and so the ability to get people to lower their guard, to listen to you, to trust you enough to say, "Hey, I can help you and I can connect with you." That to me is a real magic of selling. And if you're, I'm selling to people gym memberships, that's, it's genuinely where people are coming already with a sense of nervousness, as you said, right? They're coming already feeling like, I'm a bit uncomfortable being here. I don't know whether I should be here. And certainly going back into the 80s when, it wasn't the done thing necessarily. I think that's the magic of being able to get people to lower their guard and listen to you.
Well, exactly. Early on, I learned that I was attempting to sell features and benefits, but I had no idea what the needs were. So it forced me to use empathy to work with each potential client and understand what was his or her pain point. What were they trying to achieve? What about their life did they want to change? What available time did they have? What had they done before? And if they could look a year down the road, what would they like to look like? Or how would they like to feel was probably a better question.
Yeah.
Once I understood those variables, those needs, then I was able to utilize my knowledge of the industry and the facilities that I worked in to sell the attributes that would help them achieve their goals. And it actually showed them a machine or two or a cardio machine or two, what that instruction might be like in our organization. So
Yeah.
once I learned how to define needs and uncover needs, then it was easy to offer the value that would get them to those objectives.
Yeah. I always find it difficult when people ask me, "What's the magic words that I can say?" What's the message I can give to people that will make them want to buy? And what you've described there is a lovely way of explaining why there isn't a proposal you can make which will make people buy.
You're absolutely right. I think you've got to, again, take time to understand your customers' potential needs and then work to illustrate to them how your solution will touch on being able to make that happen. What steps they have to take, maybe what a proposed timeline would look like, so that you're already working to get that customer to have a sense of having bought your product, then having success with it and being pleased with the outcomes.
Did it ever turn out to be that they just wanted to lose that belly, or was there always a bigger story behind it?
Well, I think it depends on the individual. Often, with men who were into their career and maybe had families, that was a chief goal. Many were former athletes in high school or even in college, and just life had gotten in the way and they'd not been able to be successful. Same thing applied to women. They were more interested in cardio and losing weight, whereas men seem more often to be interested in what can I do lifting weights and how much cardio do I have to do. So again, showing some empathy and taking time to get to know my customer, my client, was imperative to making any type of sale. It was really about understanding them and understanding what they wanted to pay for. If you found out what they wanted, then you could ultimately uh, sell them a product and begin their journey to success.
I always believe that influence is about feelings. How do people feel? How do they want to feel? And there's a sense of like towards motivation and away from motivation that people hope for success. So they want to look better. They want to be healthier. They want to be stronger in a fitness context. So, or also there's an away from. I don't want to feel stiff and sore. I don't want to be unable to pick up my children. Or there's
Right.
away from. Yeah, I want to be. I don't want to be unhealthy and stuff. And so you're kind of balancing those things. And what's interesting is there's a sense there of I had this identity in high school or at college where I was an athlete, a sportsman, or successful, and I liked the way it felt. I liked the way that made me feel. I liked the identity that I had as that person when I was when I was 20, and I want to recover some of that. Now that's a motive outside of I just want to look ripped. Right? I want to get rid of the belly. I think that's the stuff that will really get people out of bed, right?
Yeah, you're exactly right, Chris. I think that if you were a younger male client, you might be interested in that rip musculature. But more often than not, people wanted to feel healthy. They
Yeah.
wanted to feel better. They wanted to have feel better, but that they also knew that would create for them a more positive outlook. So again, my objective was ultimately to be able to convey empathy and interest in their particular situation, ask the right questions that would allow them to voice those concerns, and then begin to ask questions about what would they like to look like, how would they like to feel, and then began the ability to be able to illustrate to them via various equipment or other tools how they might achieve those successes and what that might look like and how they might feel. So you begin putting that person into the future state and utilizing your solution, making the progress that they want to make, whether it's fitness or whether it's in the chemical distribution industry and needing product on time at the right price.
So I was just about to make that connection. I was just about to ask that question of how does it work now when you're talking to customers now and the proposition that you have, which I think is a brilliant proposition, by the way. I think it's a really interesting business that you're in. That how do you tie that to it? You mentioned the future state, and I think that's a key, isn't it?
Oh, of course. I think that it was an interesting transition, and I stumbled a bit moving into the industry from having worked in what was largely inside sales. Working into outside sales was a change, but the fundamentals didn't change. The steps I had to take were the same. I had to show interest in their current state, what they liked about the current state, what they would change about their current state. And once you got a sense of what they wanted to change, you could then dig deeper into those problems and understand how you might be able to illustrate to them the solution that you could offer that might solve those problems. And if you could do that, what that might save them, what that might improve for them. So again, you were working to take the time to understand the true needs, provide benefits that could solve those needs and wants, and deliver the value that they're wanting on a reliable basis.
And I'm going to touch on price right now because I know it's something we talked about when we spoke before. That if you ask customers, in most industries, many industries, buyers want price. They say, I want a cheaper price." And what we talked about was a much bigger view of value. And in fact, the way you guys operate is to try and stay away from repetitive transactional price. And I just want you to explore that a little bit about where do you see value for the people you connect with?
Oh, that's a great question. And yes, price is always important. We're in the commodity chemical business at DAX. So we're moving commodity materials all over the world. And therein lies, Chris, our value proposition in that we want to build for our customer a valuable alternative supply chain solution. If they're buying from the big guys in our space, eerily, those supply chains look very, very similar. Some of the same producers, the same rail line, trucking material into the same city, packaging that material, and then delivering it to their site on an as needed basis. Sounds relatively simple, but
Because
in our case, we're looking to provide that alternate solution where it's a supply position they've not experienced before. The goal was to then further fortify their current supply chain and offer them an alternative that if everything else goes wrong, our global sourcing capabilities are going to be able to offer a solution quickly. So that's what we work to do, understand those problems, understand what they're currently doing, and offering them something that can provide them confidence that we've got a backup in our supply chain. And this alternate solution can handle anywhere from 30% of our business to 60% of our business if needed.
And so that's but that when we talked before, one of the things I found really interesting was that that requires you to say no to certain types of deal. The value proposition that you have means that you guys are very clear about what you will not do.
Well, I would say we're probably more clear about what we can do. And
Okay.
as we're asking questions about their current solution, we want the particulars. And sometimes with customers, it's hard to get the particulars. They just illustrate, I need a certain price or I need your best offer. And that's where you've got to back up and take some time to build that trust and be able to uncover concerns they have with that current solution. So we always are clear about what we can do, and we steer away and illustrate to the customer that maybe what they're suggesting or wanting us to do may not be the best and most reliable and sustainable solution available to them.
Yeah. Yeah. I think that takes some courage. I think lots of organizations, as they grow and as they become more successful, they get tempted by customers who say, "Can you do this? Can you do a regular contract for us where you become one of our main suppliers? We like what you do. We like how reliable you are. Can you take over that?" And you said to me that's where you feel like actually we're going in a space that's not our forte. We're not. It's not where we're really strong and really bring value, and so we avoid those kind of conversations.
Well, and certainly in my experience at Univar, the company was able to acquire large customers. In fact, at one point, we had a $1 billion customer, or I should say, excuse me, let me take that back. A $100 million customer in the US that was probably $700 million to us on a global basis. And we
Yeah,
got into what was a cost plus scenario negotiated by our chief growth officer. And despite our best efforts, and despite the fact that the customer was largely very happy with the solution, we couldn't make a dime. We'd not calculated the expense we'd incur with some of the solutions they dictated were imperative to our relationship. So that became a very difficult situation and ended up in a not so happy breaking up, so to speak.
interesting. Isn't it funny how much we learn through life through our own experience of having dealt with these moments and then deciding what works and what doesn't work because we've been through the pain.
Well, that's where it comes to that uncomfortable conversation, Chris, that you mentioned earlier.
Yeah.
There are times when, for whatever reason, the solution isn't working or isn't working as well as it once did. And your customers demanding better results. And you've got to start that sales process again. You've got to better understand why they feel the solution hasn't worked. What are the details? Is it late delivery? Is it poor product quality? Is the administration portion inaccurate? Is there poor response from our customer service team? Did our driver not behave appropriately once in the plant site? All those
Mhm.
things are contributors to our customers' perception of whether we've succeeded or not, and whether we're bringing value or not. And just one incident like that can really upset the apple cart. And as a salesperson, you've got to be well enough connected to your customer where he or she will bring that concern to you versus getting frustrated and looking to alternative options. So you're always
So
wanting to maintain that rapport, regardless of how the business is performing.
so we're going to get. I'd really love to get into an example of a difficult customer you've dealt with in the past, and I know there's a story we talked about previously. But before I do that, one of the things I want to just point out is how often you've called it that the devil is in the detail. That the top surface of things seems good. You know, buyers will communicate that everything is perfect. You know, volumes are perfect, and everything is reliable, 100% reliable. And all I'm interested in is price. Can you beat the price? And what you guys and what this proposition understands is that the devil and the opportunities in the detail. If only 97% of your supply is reliable, there's an opportunity. If there is availability delays, so it's going to be 4 days late, that's an opportunity because the way that manufacturing works and raw material works is there is no or very little space for these things, and so that's where the opportunity is. And you mentioned it there, a great example, the behavior of delivery drivers, that the way that they operate on site around factories, around machinery, around means that it's a safety, a health and safety risk if people are not conforming to standards or not behaving the way you want them to be. And as an organization, they don't want those people on their site. And all of this stuff contributes to their experience of purchasing from you. And getting those things right is the opportunity because you can maybe cut some corners here and there, but that's the risk. You're going to risk the whole business.
Absolutely. A failed delivery because a driver uh, wasn't able to interact comfortably with their plant opposite, their receiving clerk or their operations attendant who was going to help the offload. Negative outcomes from those interactions are very difficult to overcome. And you think about, well, we've made 50 deliveries here and all have been good but this one. The fact is, you're only as good as the last one.
Mm.
And that will be put in front of you despite the other 49 successful deliveries. I have an example from my career where when I was general manager at Univar in Houston, Texas, we had decided to repack a very dangerous product for a customer. They didn't want it in drums or they didn't want it in the typical bags that the producer would put that material in. So we were asked to repack that into, I think, 25-pound drums, if memory serves. We did that and we made the delivery on time, and we were so excited because they never had anyone who could do that for them.
Yeah.
So we did that, and lo and behold, the same day in the early afternoon, I got a call, and it was from my salesperson who was distraught that the material had ultimately clumped up and was solid as a brick in these bags versus a free flowing material. So I said to the salesperson, the first thing we're going to do is go out and see that customer right now. We're going to see it at its worst, and we're going to show some empathy to the situation, and we're going to begin to illustrate to him how we're going to solve that problem. But let's see his perception. Let's see what he sees first. So we made that trip. We had that meeting. We had to make some changes, and fortunately, we had operations personnel who understood the challenges the customer faced. We were able to use a different type of drum to better contain or keep the moisture out of the container. And we made multiple deliveries. In fact, I think the company still has that business to this day. But it was how we reacted to that problem. We immediately initiated a supplier corrective action form where I led the investigation. We were able to detail those mistakes and overcome that mistake with flying colors.
And how does your salesperson feel about going and seeing the customer? Were they saying to you, "Can we not get away with do we have to do this?" Were they trying to kind of avoid this conversation? Because it's gonna be an uncomfortable discussion.
Absolutely. And this salesperson is now senior VP for a very large chemical company today. But at that point in time, she was a junior salesperson and had had very little experience in the field. So I think she was quite terrified about going to see the customer right away, but it was a valuable lesson and really helped her take a big leap forward in terms of her commercial skills and aptitude to uncover the real buying reasons with her customers afterwards.
And you said ultimately you've ended up, or the customer ended up in a much better position because you addressed it. So they're still loyal to that. Do you think that your response to how to solve the problem contributed to that?
I can't think of any other reason. They'd had unsuccessful attempts previously. We started off as we tried this packaging measure unsuccessfully, but we responded quickly, thoroughly, and We made sure that the solution we provided was absolutely what they wanted, asked questions to see if there was anything else that we could do better. And we retained that business. And again, it was a great learning lesson that I've shared time and time again in my career about how you overcome obstacles.
Mm. I think there's so much value in working with customers to solve problems. Um, I, there's a sense that you hear at times of people who say, "Well, let's solve the problem, then go to the customer with solutions." You know, don't bring me problems, bring me answers.
Right.
Uh, and each of the statements you made, every time you've referenced this, you said, "We went with empathy, understand their position, understand what's going on, go and look at their site, go and look at what they're dealing with right now," because you otherwise you're guessing, right? You're guessing what the answer might be, what the solution might be, and you're not involving them, and yet it's their problem. And I guess it seems easy to say, "Well, it's their problem. You know, we need to understand how they see the problem." But the temptation is to, let's see the problem from our perspective. Let's fix it from how we say it, how we see it, or let's put the blame on them. You know, maybe they didn't store them in the right way. We delivered these drums and they let them
Right.
get wet, or they let them, they were too slow to move them indoors, or something like that. Like, but going looking at from their point of view, that's that's a real key, isn't it?
Without a doubt. I think that in my experience over the years, when you have to have that difficult conversation with your customer, it's not one to be rushed. It's not one to enter nervously and show tension. You've got to be a calming influence and be able to have your customer open up and tell them the concerns. Obviously, first and foremost, they've got their company's needs at heart, but they've also got personal goals and personal responsibilities that they're accountable for in the role that they have. So until you've taken the time to appreciate that and understand those challenges, you'll have a difficult time having that difficult conversation and coming about with a positive resolution. So again, back to empathy. That empathy is so vital in order to be successful. And you've got to be patient. And sometimes you're going to have customers who are going to vent, and that venting might be quite uncomfortable.
Oh
But you've
yeah.
got to see your way through that in order to arrive at an amenable solution.
I talk we talked about, towards and away from motivation, and, you know, just putting ourselves going back in this customer's shoes for a second. They've struggled to find anyone to deliver this solution for them. They now found you guys. Yeah, we can do this, we can deliver it. So they feel good about it. Now they're kind of setting themselves up internally with, "Hey, I've achieved something other people haven't achieved." That's gonna be good for them, good for their reputation, good for their business. You know, they're a success, and it's visible. They're gonna tell people about it. They're gonna now we're gonna, we're moving to this new solution. I've achieved it. When it goes wrong, what you have is very visible failure. That's the worst case scenario for a buyer, isn't it? Their ego all of a sudden is going to be really under pressure because they told everyone that they'd found an answer, and it turns out that the answer doesn't work. They've spent money, they've spent time and resources, and what they have now is products that they can't use. No wonder they're angry.
Oh, of course. And another example in my career was a customer, a very large customer. We'd all know the name that we were delivering a product regularly. It was once a week or twice a week, I don't recall, but it was a full truckload of product. And this was critical to their daily operation requirements. And unfortunately, this customer wanted delivery no later than 6 a.m. at his dock. And his shift began at 6, and then he was responsible for receiving and then loading that material into the batch. And we were late one time after having made this delivery, oh, a dozen, probably 3 or 4 dozen times. It was like clockwork, but that one delivery really nearly cost us the business. And again, I told the sales manager who worked for me at that point, let's go see James and talk to him about this. And he says, Mike, he's going to cuss you up one side and down the other. And I said, well, that's okay. That's what we're here for. So we made that visit, and he literally said, I don't care what expletive uh, sees your ship sails through, but your ship better arrive at time and do it flawlessly. And we took that to heart and we redoubled our efforts through our dispatch and driving team to ensure that everybody understood that we needed to arrive by quarter to six, 15 minutes early, so
Yeah.
5:45 a.m. in order to use this customer. We need to be there early and be ready to offload at 6 o'clock without fail. We did so, and we retained that business, but we could have lost that business had we not responded correctly, rapidly. And then we followed up on that execution. The next delivery, the salesperson followed up. The next delivery. Then we let it go, and a couple of weeks later, we followed up. Then we had a longer term follow up at 90 days to ensure that the solution had held. We'd not taken any steps backward, and that they were happy with our solution and it was a value add to their business. But again, those conversations can be tough. But if you're not patient, you don't have the empathy, you may not get the answer that you need in order to succeed.
And this is back to your example of what is it that people really want. And he wanted a supply that was able to deliver on the right time. To him, that was for whatever reason, whatever his motives were, that was the thing that he really wanted. And so you could maybe be 5% cheaper, but if you're not reliably delivering at the time that he wants, he's prepared to pay 5% more to get it on time. That's what you were trying to talk about earlier on about where value is, right?
Of course. And whereas your price might be the best, and if your service isn't the best, you create problems because time is money. And when you're delivering into a major chemical, specialty chemical, petrochemical complex, their operating costs are well into the millions of dollars per day.
Mm,
So you interrupt production, you slow production, you cause concern with that. There's millions of dollars at stake. So
mm.
you're likely only to get one chance. So attention to detail, execution of those details each and every time are vital to being able to satisfy your customers' needs and retain them on a long term and hopefully strategic basis.
So, Mike, I want to change the topic just slightly because you spent a lot of your career in leadership roles, managing teams, managing businesses. Um, you talked a lot about customer empathy and patience in this episode so far. Do you apply the same principles to running your teams, or is there another layer that you need to add in when you're working with colleagues rather than customers?
Some of the fundamentals are exactly the same. No two salespeople or no two operations folks are the same. They may have the same job description. Their jobs may be very similar in what they do, but at the end of the day, they're all different people. And you've got to find what's important to them. So building relationships with your team and direct reports and those beneath them is vital to your success.
Hmm.
I think it's important that you take the time to help them understand that you're interested in their career success, short and long term. And that may be with your company, maybe something changes and they need to move on to something else. But your objective is to make them the best possible performer you can, so that that benefits the company, but also develops talent because success is always about succession and identifying people who can take the next step when the opportunity presents itself. So, yeah, I think some of those same principles are absolutely required if you're going to be a successful leader of any team on a long term basis.
And so you've always seen your people as the resource that you're utilizing, right? So your attitude to them is that they are I invest in this resource and it will repay me. If I build their capability, build their confidence, build their trust in me, they'll pay us back. So you have a very sounds like you have a very kind of investing type approach to the team.
Well, I would describe my leadership style as that of a servant leader. I want to be able to help people overcome obstacles, address their performance shortcomings and weaknesses, while also applauding the successes and improvement that they make. So you've got to be able to have developed trust and a strong rapport, and you've got to show interest. Showing interest in uh, his or her spouse and children they have, and the little league game their child played, or whatever circumstance it is in their life, showing that bit of interest builds that rapport and builds that openness and communication where you can talk about the good things, but you can also um, patiently and confidently address the shortcomings and weaknesses and agree to a plan for improvement.
That sounds to me very much like the agenda of what's really important to the customer, because customer will tell you the most important thing is price, but really what's under the skin of this, right? And we talked about that already, and finding what else matters to them. What you've just described there, just to me, sounds similar. That it's easy to say what people want. They want from their job. They want, I don't know, salary or bonuses and stuff. But why is what matters, and why is their children, is their spouse, is the little league game on the Sunday. It, that's the why, and I think that's what I'm learning from you today is that getting beneath the surface is where opportunity lies.
I think we've all read this and heard this and maybe even experienced this, and that is that often good people don't leave companies, they leave bad managers. They
Hmm.
leave leadership that is stale or overpowering and abrasive or insensitive. And that's where we as leaders have to understand what's motivating them and what's most important to them after 5 o'clock. And if we can build that relationship and have that understanding, that works well to being able to understand what it is they want from the job other than the paycheck and other than the promotion, and be able to work towards helping them learn and grow and achieving fulfillment that is complete, aside from the salary and the compensation.
Do you know, it's amazing when I reflect on your career, Michael, that I know plenty of people who spend their lives trying to find something unique about their product, technology or service or something that's unique about the product because they feel that's the way that I need to get ahead, have intellectual property. You have built an incredibly successful career in both sales and leadership with what are commodities, gym memberships, and now
Yeah.
chemicals, which are commodity-led chemicals, and you found the magic ingredient, which is just it's not about the product, it's about the people.
Precisely. And at DAX, we talk about our value proposition being offering our customer a valuable alternative supply chain solution. So it's a commodity also. But I think as you look at athletes and you look at business leaders who've had a lot of success, one thing that is common amongst them is they execute the fundamentals
Mm.
extraordinarily well. Now they're
Yes.
doing the same fundamentals as others, but they've become passionate about doing that and making sure that they execute every step of the plan of the process as best as they can. So often they're just doing the simple things better than anyone else, and I'm a big believer in that. There's not a lot of secrets, but it's all about understanding and developing a strategy that's right, but then more importantly, being able to execute against that strategy.
Do you know what? That's so much truth in that, and it really speaks to me because that's my experience of life. Lots of people don't want to do the basic things. They don't want to do it. They want the glory. They want to score the goals. They want to score the touchdowns. They want to, you know, take the the glory, but all of that comes from, as you said, doing the fundamentals, doing the basics well. I've always said salespeople who meet their customers on a regular basis, they're going to do better than the salesperson who's looking for the white whale, who's gonna, pay for my year in one meeting, right? Because it just life doesn't work that way, and so you really speak to me in that piece of advice.
Well, I'm glad it hits home with you. I know that that's largely what I've attempted to do in my career, and I've had some mistakes along the way. But I think the key is a successful leader will take time to understand his or her strengths and weaknesses and keep those weaknesses in the forefront of your mind and work to basically execute those fundamentals each and every day. The little things make a big difference. And attention to detail is a winning solution for your customer and for your team.
So, what is your advice? So, as we come to the end of our conversation, what would be your advice to a younger Michael if you were looking back now and thinking, you said I made some mistakes, I did some things well. What would your advice be to a younger you?
Well, hindsight is always 2020, if not better. So I think as I would guide a young person like myself, having come from some of the same background, I think two things that were important to me at that age were patience and controlling my temper. I was a very driven individual, and sometimes driving towards my goal caused ruffled feathers with others. Or maybe I was too forceful in how I directed my conversation to an employee or a team. So those were harsh lessons, and fortunately, I learned early. And even better yet, I had people that were willing to take their time and tell me what they saw and how my actions affected others. So again, the things that I would talk about is patience and control your emotions, and let the facts dictate the actions that you take.
I like that. I think it's wonderful to hear that reflection. I always think it's a difficult question, but I like asking the question, what would I say to my younger self? And when you said patience initially, I thought to myself, okay, well that's something you've talked about already, but it seemed to come from a different place. You said patience, almost like don't be so enthusiastic to tell people what you need and what you demand. It's be patient, and which is something you've implemented yourself.
Yeah, absolutely. I learned a lesson even during my time at Univar. I had a very good sales professional who worked for me, and we were friends outside of work. And aside from that, because we had that relationship and I was helping her with her career, she was brutally honest. She told me one day that, Mike, you're really serious. And I said, really? Really? How serious? And she said, well, sometimes you get so laser focused that you're unable to listen to some of the issues and concerns and problems we have. And that was a real eye opener because I'd been successful with what I thought was empathetic leadership, but I had exhibited times where I deviated from that behavior. And it was a real eye opener in my career to listen to those people and to better understand. Some people may experience that, but not have the time or courage to say something to me. So I really
Yeah.
needed to take that to heart. So that was another great learning lesson from a talented team member, who went on to do other things very well. And that was advice that I still think about to this day.
It's three examples you've shared today that I really appreciate, and they connect back to the same thing: being prepared to face into difficult moments and difficult conversations, listening to customers who are unhappy, listening to team members give you feedback that you don't necessarily want to hear. But those have been moments where you've learned a lot, where you've developed a lot, and where you've created connections that have become long lasting and powerful. And I just think it shows the importance and the courage of listening to things that we might not want to hear.
Yeah, I'll give you one other example. That's a short one, Chris. When I was a general manager at Univar and would address big groups, uh, often I wanted to invoke some conversation. I wanted to provoke questions. And ironically, one of the best people who would open the conversation when I gave large meetings was my receptionist. And she was responsible at that point in time for greeting people that came in the door, which was largely vendors and suppliers, some customers, but then also answering the phones at that point in time and transferring the calls. But she had that empathy for the business and for her role, and she would often help lead conversations. So uh, that was just an example of me taking time to learn all my employees' needs and really trying to connect with all of them. So it was a great example, and it really taught me I need to pay attention to everyone because even the lowliest janitor or a receptionist cares about the business and wants to know how they can continue to grow as well.
Wonderful example. Michael, I've learned a lot from this conversation. I appreciate you sharing it, and I'm sure the audience will also agree. Thank you for sharing the stories and sharing your time. It's been a wonderful conversation.
It's been an absolute pleasure, Chris. I appreciate the opportunity and wish you and the team continued success. And I'll keep listening myself to your podcast. Thank you so much.
My pleasure. My pleasure. Thanks for listening. I hope you took away some useful insights. Join us again next time when we unpick the behaviours of more difficult people. Until then, take care and see you soon.